Welcome back, ladies and gents, to another video. Today we're talking about 7 seeds. Imagine this, you're living a normal day in your life. Maybe you're out with friends, spending time with your girlfriend, or just walking alone in the street. Then you suddenly wake up in a strange new world, surrounded by 5 strangers on a rapidly sinking boat in the middle of a storm. For Natsu, this is her new reality when suddenly some lady opens up the door and asks her to follow and hurry up as they're about to sink and there's no time. The girl realizes she's on a ship. It's raining and the storm's building up. She's supposed to jump onto the rescue boat that's already located with a bunch of characters whom we've yet to be introduced to. So far, there are just 4 survivors on the boat. A painfully shy teen Natsu, a braided woman who seems to be leading the group named Botan, a long-haired boy Semimaru, and Arashi, the nice guy. Nobody can recall what happened the last night and how they ended up being on the ship. The group reaches a cliff, comes across an island, and splits up in search for food. Then we're taken to a scene where a girl named Hana is fleeing from a swarm of skittering beetles. She outruns them, takes water from a waterfall, and then is attacked by a swarm of stark white, red-eyed praying mantises. 2 guys rush to rescue her, but one of them, the team leader, is stabbed in the back with a stinger the size of a bayonet. He makes it out alive, but the sting appears to intensify his already aggressiveness. They're part of a group of individuals who are camping on a large wooden raft tied to 3 inflatable rafts. The group leader leads an attempt to flee the island, but their raft is destroyed by a storm and they're washed back. Later, while having a quarrel with his team members, he falls into a pit full of huge mantises, but soon returns to the group, seemingly unharmed but displeased. Somewhere else on the island, 6 people awaken from cryogenic cells in an unidentified metal room. When their leader enters the room, the others draw their weapons and fire at him. They fire before he can say, "What the hell's going on?" He curses them as he falls to the ground. Arashi becomes unwell after eating mushrooms collected by Natsu, but he quickly heals. After, he decides to run off with Natsu, as the other 2 members seem suspicious. They're trapped by carnivorous plants and attacked by giant rats, but are saved by Mozu, who's also a survivor who got separated from his group. Arashi asks if he knows why they're on the island, and Mozu explains that they're part of a governmental survival experiment. Botan outlines the 7 Seeds project. She explains that the scientists predicted a meteorite would hit the Earth, prompting the world to launch a project called the 7 Seeds. They selected young and healthy people and put them into cryo-sleep, and after it was determined that the world was inhabitable, they would be released. The Japanese government divides the people into 5 categories: winter, spring, summer A, summer B, and fall. Each group comprises of 7 people who are kept in the dark about what will happen before being cryogenically preserved, as well as 1 adult guide who's been educated in wilderness survival. There are also sealed shelters with seedlings and instruction books near the 7 Fuji. These 7 Fuji are not related to the famous Mount Fuji, but are regional landmarks also named Fuji. As a result of the changed climate, homicidal enormous insects have emerged, and the groups must adjust to their new surroundings while trying to figure out what's happened to the Earth. Meanwhile, Hana's leader guides his group back to the waterfall where they encounter the giant insects. He then leads them into a tunnel, which is actually a trap because he's been infected with insect larvae. However, in the last moment, in order to save the others, he burns himself on fire and instructs them to look for the 7 Fujis. The crew returns to the shore to construct a new raft and is ready to sail to the closest Fuji. Botan's group comes upon 3 individuals who are being threatened by a crocodile in a pond, and she rushes in to save them. They're the remaining members of Summer Team B, according to Botan. Natsu learns they're on an island in a lake, so they make a raft and set out to reach the mainland. They arrive and start looking for food, but they also discover the Nagasaki peace statue submerged. Botan decides to travel to the nearest Fuji. Natsu comes upon the entrance to one of the sealed shelters with the goods needed for survival and self-sufficiency. Later, one of the members chooses to pay a visit to his hometown. Natsu and Arashi join him only to discover that it's submerged. Arashi resolves to return to Tokyo in the hope of finding his girlfriend Hana. Natsu follows him, and later Semimaru eventually joins them. They come across several other humans along the way. The trio realize they've stumbled onto the Fall Team village. The team's been there for 3 years. The 3 travelers are tangled up when Semimaru tries to steal some food. The Fall Team leader frees the 3 prisoners, but later decides to poison them and everyone else in the group because he believes the 7 Seeds project has failed. Fortunately though, Semimaru suspects that the water's poisoned and prevents the others from drinking it. Right after, the trio departs. As they're in trouble launching their inflatable boat, the Fall Team leader comes and captain helps them so they can continue their voyage to eastern Japan. After reaching there, they discover another locked shelter, but it's flooded and useless. They continue their voyage and come across to another ruin. Arashi jumps into the water and gets attacked by a big fish. He's saved by a bearded man, who introduces himself as Takahiro. As it turns out, he's the only survivor from the winter team, and it's almost 15 years that he's been surviving on his own. The trio flee throughout the night, fearful of Takahiro. He's alone with his dogs once more. Meanwhile, the spring teams Hana and Haru paddle their boat through the city's submerged ruins. They spend the night in an abandoned church before returning to the squad the next day. They decide to make the place they are as a base. While exploring the area, Hana is being pursued by a dinosaur-like thing, but Takahiro and his dogs save her. Despite considerable skepticism, Takahiro gets accepted into the spring team. He tells about 3 people he's met before. Hana thinks one of the 3 people is her boyfriend Arashi. Later, Hana comes into contact with a plant that Takahiro claims is toxic, and she begins to show symptoms. She decides to leave the group and find Arashi to avoid infecting the others. While sailing on the boat, she's thrown into the ocean by a big fish. She concludes that life isn't worth living, but Takahiro saves her and transports her to the island where Summer Team B first set foot. Her health, however, continues to deteriorate, and she sets out on her own, preparing to die. She regains her will to live when she finds a message carved on the rock by Arashi. Takahiro thinks that salt can help Hana heal by neutralizing the poison, so he looks for a salty pond. Takahiro, Haru, and Hana return to the Fall Team's base, only to find it deserted and blanketed in volcanic ash. Meanwhile, Arashi and his companions discover more treasure as well as a sailboat. They decide to return on the sailing boat and rejoin their squad. Now, back to Hana and the others, they discover a tunnel entrance beneath, as well as 2 members of the Fall Team. Later at night, someone of the Fall Team apprehends Haru, who claims to have heard a sound of a motor. When Hana's group go find him, the Fall Team takes by force their inflatable raft and moves further into the underground system, which appears to be an evacuation complex. They find that power is available and they access the computer system. Meanwhile, Hana's group also explore another part of the complex where they find a dead body and a diary. The diary details that Hana's father engaged a ventriloquist and other entertainers for a new underground theme park. Soon, the meteor slammed into Earth, obliterating the surface. The facility wasn't able to cope with the disaster, and eventually the food supplies ran out. Then a deadly virus spread throughout the facility and it was sealed off. To prevent the disease from spreading, the final survivors were frozen to death, and the ventriloquist was last to die, ending his own life. As the 7 Seed survivors emerge from the complex, they're confronted by armed personnel wearing protective equipment who accuse them of spreading the X virus as they escape from the compound. The Fall Team leader gets shot by the armed personnel while saving his team member. The armed group decides that the X virus has most likely already been released and abandons the teams. As the team leader's dying, he tells Hana that Arashi was the one who inspired him to stay alive and support his team. Later, when the 7 Seeds return to Team Spring's camp, they discover that it's been demolished and that the members have gone missing. Takahiro recommends that they continue to his former camp. In the meantime, Arashi, Natsu, and Semimaru learn to sail the boat and come across a girl floating in the water who looks like their team member Hotaru. After rescuing her, it turns out that she's not Hotaru, but a member of the Spring Team, and she claims that Hotaru is dying. Elsewhere, Summer Team A discovers a boy from Team Spring. They seem to want to take care of him, but actually they experiment food and medical remedies on him. They then use him as bait to attract predators that they may later hunt down and kill for food. Summer Team A's well-designed camp is discovered by Hana and the others, and they understand they were the ones who shot the Fall Team leader. Takahiro sets up a distraction while Hana tries to save the boy, but they're apprehended. Meanwhile, Hana's team captures a girl from Summer A Team, who come across Haru. They offer to exchange her for the kid. Suddenly, Takahiro and the camp are assaulted by a colony of white carnivorous bats, which everyone works together to overcome. Summer Team A and the other groups gradually learn to work together despite some hostility between them. Together they hatch a strategy to exterminate the bat colony using music composed by Haru. Summer Team A also assists with the treatment of the other's sickness. When Ango, a member of Summer A Team, learns that Hana is the daughter of a professor who trained him, he informs everyone about the Summer Team A program. After a flashback, he expresses hatred towards Hana as a result of her affiliation with her father and his crew. Hana wants to leave the camp because Ango tried to rape her. Takahiro and Haru offer to accompany her. Meanwhile, Arashi and his team arrive near the Fall Team's abandoned village. Natsu discovers a note from Hana addressed to Arashi, but she's hesitant to give it to him. Natsu and Semimaru later come upon their team member, who informs them that Botan and another member are in danger. After saving them, Natsu gives Arashi Hana's note. Meanwhile, Hana is forced to accompany the group in their quest for a water source underground. Ryo and Hana go further down into the cave in search of water. Then suddenly Ryo cuts Hana's rope and lets her fall to her death because he worries she's making Ango psychologically ill. The rest of the group decides to look for Hana. Meanwhile, Hana has survived the fall and is searching for water. She meets Ango. While they're arguing, Ango comes towards her and she slips into the water. When the others arrive, she exclaims that Ryo can't be trusted. As they prepare to rescue Hana, the water carries her away. Did Hana really die by the end of Season 1? This was a major cliffhanger, and we're not going to spoil anything for you. To find out what happens next, you got to watch 7 Seeds Season 2. We hope to see you in the next video. Until then, stay safe and happy. Bye!